But this is the first time we heard from Joe Burrow, and especially in light of a lot of reports about the Cincinnati Bengals and if he actually would want to end up there. This is what, can you play number 3, please? This is what Joe Burrow said in this back and forth with Dan about the Bengals.
What have you heard from the Bengals?
Nothing really. It's hard. I haven't talked to any teams yet. Where you can't really talk to them until the combine too much.
Yeah. Do you want to? Do you want to hear from the Bengals?
Look, whenever you're in the conversation for the number 1 pick, it's obviously a dream come true. But I know they have a process to go through. I have a process to go through. So it's a long ways away.
But is being number 1 or going to the right team the most important to you?
Combination of both.
Yeah.
You want to go number 1, but you also want to go to a great organization that's committed to winning Super Bowls.
That part at the end there is the part of what Joe Burrow said that's gotten the most attention today. Want to go to an organization that's committed to winning and committed to winning Super Bowls. And a lot have questioned if that's the Cincinnati Bengals. So Carson Palmer made statements earlier this week. And of course, Carson Palmer in 2003 was the number 1 overall pick in the draft of Cincinnati, and he spent a decade there before he ultimately held out, almost a decade there, before he held out during the 2011 season. The Bengals drafted Andy Dalton and ultimately shipped Carson Palmer to Oakland before the midseason trade deadline. And then Palmer will play in Oakland and then in Arizona to finish up his career. Oddly enough, Joe Burrow will be training with Carson Palmer's brother, Jordan Palmer, ahead of this year's draft. That's a report from the NFL Network. But that's what's been interesting. And that the Carson Palmer comment, let me not lose track there, that he said earlier this week on CBS Sports Radio was, quote, "That's why I wanted out. I never felt like the organization was really trying to win a Super Bowl and really chasing a Super Bowl," end quote. So that's kind of damning. But the other part of it, too, is that's also not completely unheard of. Most people look at the 2 worst organizations in the NFL, and they look at Cleveland and Cincinnati. The worst run, the cheapest ownership. I mean, that's kind of been the MO of those 2 organizations. The flip side, and it's, for me anyway, and again, this is an outside looking in perspective. I am not purporting to be in any way an expert on the Cincinnati Bengals, that structure, how it's run, the organization, its history, any of that. But I can give you my perspective outside looking in on what I see there. And what I see is a team that committed to Marvin Lewis for 15 years. And a team that is in a division with maybe the model franchise in NFL history. Not the Patriots, because they've been on a great run for 2 decades. But I mean, in the history of the NFL, the model franchise as far as ownership and stability, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when you have to see twice a year, perhaps the most stable franchise in the NFL that is seemingly always in the mix for the playoffs and Super Bowl runs, the thing that the Steelers have done better than anybody is consistency with their coaches. They've had 3 head coaches since 1969. Let me say that again quickly. The Pittsburgh Steelers have had 3 head coaches since 1969. 50 years, 3 coaches. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. That's it. They've bred stability. That has been their MO. And the Bengals have looked at it. So they gave Marvin Lewis every chance. 15 years they committed to Marvin Lewis. They got him the playoffs, could never get over the hump. The other part of it, too, how many times has Cincinnati had a franchise quarterback? And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to bat for Cincinnati. They made curious decisions throughout, and that's obvious. But when you look at who their quarterbacks have been going back to their last Super Bowl appearance in 1989, January of 89, when they lost to the 49ers. Boomer Esiason, Jeff Blake, Achilles Smith, John Kitna, Carson Palmer, Andy Dalton. I mean, they tried with Achilles Smith. They took a quarterback in the top of round 1. They used the number 1 overall pick for Carson Palmer. They drafted Andy Dalton. They're going to draft Joe Burrow. But this might be the first time they have a transcendent player at the most important position on the field. So that was interesting to me to hear Joe Burrow talk about that, because I know everyone's latching on to the end of that comment where he talked about wanting to go to an organization committed to winning Super Bowls and people wondering if that's Cincinnati. We'll find out. But it does make it easier, doesn't it, when you have that coach and that quarterback? I mean, wasn't that the Saints for decades? And it wasn't that the Saints wouldn't spend money. They just spent it in bad, they just spent it poorly. And they never had the right coach, and they never had the right quarterback until they got Sean Payton and Drew Brees. And maybe Joe Burrow can be that transcendent player for that organization. Maybe not, but maybe. What I do know is you're not winning without that guy. Look at the two teams that are going to play in the game on Sunday. Both have elite quarterbacks. One is maybe the best quarterback in the game today. A couple more from Joe Burrow with Dan Patrick today. He just basically reacted to being in the conversation for the number 1 overall pick.
You know, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And my dream always has been to play in the NFL. And that's, the fact that I'm sitting on here being in the conversation of the number 1 pick is honestly crazy to me, watching the draft growing up, watching the guys walk out and hold their jersey. So, there's a lot of things that go into it, but it's a huge honor.
All right, 2 more things real quick. One, Dan Patrick asked the question. You'll hear it.
Do you have any doubts?
Any doubts about myself?
Yeah.
No.
Nothing.
No. Why would I?
Well, you're going into the NFL.
Yeah, and it's going to be very, very difficult, but I'm confident that I'm going to work just about as hard, if not harder, than everybody else. And, if I might be a good player, I might not be a good player, but I know I'm going to work my hardest to be the best player I can be.
Please come back, Joe. Oh, don't ever leave us, Joe. Play that again, please.
Do you have any doubts?
Any doubts about myself?
Yeah.
No.
Nothing.
No. Why would I?
I love him. I don't even know if it's a platonic love. It might be a romantic love. I don't know. Maybe I'm sitting here acknowledging to you that I have romantic feelings for Joe Burrow. Okay, that's not true. But could you blame me if it were? All right, one more. Here's Joe Burrow talking about the best athlete on LSU's team this year.
Best athlete on your team was who?
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
No question.
No question.
Really?
Unreal. He's going to play for 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he was spectacular. He had some moves where
everyone looks at all my stats because we threw the ball so much because we had great guys on the outside as well. But, Clyde's a different beast.
The only thing that could have made that better, Musso, only thing singular, would have been if Joey B would have dropped a Catholic High! And it just so happens I'm wearing my Catholic High pullover today. My Catholic High quarter zip.
I don't think Joe Burrow knows about the Catholic High bit.
He knows about the Catholic High bit. Yeah, I guess Todd Peterson didn't know about the Todd Peterson bit either, did he?
He didn't until he came on the show and you told him,
correct?
correct?
I did it twice. I said it twice.
I didn't hear you twice.
I said Todd Peterson didn't know about the Todd Peterson bit?
Ted Peterson.
There you go. Yeah, you're sure. So Joey B went on the Dan Patrick show on Super Bowl week and said the best athlete on the team. Not the Biletnikoff Award winner. Not the Heisman winner. Not the Thorpe Award winner. The kid who went to Cal